Flowers have long been used to express our deepest emotions, from great joy to deep sorrow. For me, painting flowers is an extension of that desire. When a floral painting is painted expressively, it goes beyond the realm of being a pretty picture, possessing energy and movement which enable it to take on a life of its own. But painters often get so involved painting individual flowers that they just skim over the supporting elements, which are essential in making a painting whole and expressive. In this 4-part series, I have attempted to go beyond simply painting a floral and have dealt with some of the supporting elements, which often make the difference between a pretty picture and an expressive, vibrant floral painting. I've made these tapes as a result of numerous requests from fellow artists, and thus have attempted to focus on the issues most requested by artists, as well as focus on the biggest hurdles I have encountered. I hope to go beyond the how-tos to involve you in the thought processes that guide me in making artful decisions. The tape series consists of 4 parts. Tape 1, capturing the essence of a bouquet. Tape 2, the use of greens, whites, and yellows. Tape 3, interpreting glass containers and lace fabrics. Tape 4, backgrounds. I hope this series will stimulate and challenge you to go beyond simply painting what is in front of you, and that you continue on an inner journey of expressing your own creative self in floral watercolors. The essence of this bouquet is to duplicate the vitality and interplay of rhythm, movement, shape, and texture. Of importance, this setup is only a suggestion. Floral arrangements can change from day to day or hour to hour. One must remain flexible. This bouquet was put together primarily with using the greens as a start, and I masked them, putting different textures, different color greens together. This is the backdrop for my flowers. The flowers were chosen because I wanted different colors and textures, and I wanted a rhythm flowing through the bouquet to help create depth and interest. The colors and textures, I moved them around quite a bit until I ended up with an arrangement that I'm satisfied with. One section is more of a triangle with an S leading out of it. Usually after I start my bouquet, have it all set up, I'll do some very rough pencil sketches. And these are guidelines. And I'm starting with the hosta leaves at the bottom just to give myself my direction a little bit. I might end up even changing these. This is a suggestion, so very often I will exaggerate the curves and lines. like that to flow over more. Now there's a grouping of wax flowers. I do not draw them individually. I just put big round or more of a square shape. And this dahlia, what I'm trying to do is just get the outside shape going, not worrying about every petal. And we have another dahlia on top of it. What I'm trying to do is establish this line going throughout the page. I will indicate where there is a center that might be of interest. And I want to make sure that these shapes are different sizes, that they're not all the same size, and that they have a little bit of movement in and out of the bouquet. This is the Shasta daisy, which could look pretty stiff the way it is right now. I might move some of the petals around. These colors are very vibrant, and I am attracted to colors, as you probably can tell. This would be the rose. And then there's a lisianthus underneath, which I put there just for the placement of the purple color, not so much that it's going to read what it is. Okay, I'm coming down to the bottom where the zinnia is. I want it to hang because that gives it a little more movement, and just put the oval shape. And I'm comparing where it falls compared to the dahlia. My colors are put in puddles on the palette, and if you notice that I keep, I have them not quite like a syrup, but a pretty good consistency. And what I will do is I'll pull out all the colors that I think I'm going to use for that little grouping. And I paint in groupings, so I tie everything together and not have little individual lollipops that I have to connect at the end. Now the greens are composed of all the yellows and blues, and I don't have a set balance as to how much yellow, how much blue. It's just more or less a matter of feel. The main yellow greens would be made between Windsor blue and Indian yellow, but it can change. I can add the lemon, cadmium lemon into it at any time. Now I'm going to start out with a cobalt blue cadmium lemon just at the top, this very soft, maybe using a little bit of cerulean blue. Came across a little too thick, but what I'm going to do is just add water and more or less use the brush as though I were drawing calligraphy. I'm not worried that I have everything exactly as I see it. All I want to do is my interpretation or feeling. And by mixing the colors on the paper, I get a lot more variety and texture. And it's much more interesting to the eye. Now I'm painting what is in back and what is in front. Add a little bit of a cobalt violet there because there's overlapping stems. But I want to have it very flowy, so I'm exaggerating the gracefulness of the stems. Now, as I'm approaching, coming down, I'm getting closer to where I see some leaves forming. And I'll just, instead of stopping, I'll just continue on and pull them all together. And if you notice that my brush, I might start out with my brush as a point, but then I press down using the whole belly of the brush. This enables me to put in larger shapes with a lot less brushwork. Now I have drawn in where I see white flowers, and I'm approaching that right now. One other thing is when I stop, I move from one area to the other. I'll take the flat brush filled with water and soften the edges. So this enables me to come back and either work behind or add in front at any time. Now I'm going to come in here and go around these white flowers, the phlox, and I want to punch up the color a little. Just add a little sparkle here and there. I use a color called John Brilliant, and it's a very opaque color, but I use it with a lot of water, and I use it to soften or make my colors a little more subtle than just plain water would do. Here I'm doing putting the bud in, and I want to not put as much green in as I see. Now I'm coming into where that Gerber daisy is. And I'm forming some of the petals. And behind I see some other color going on, and what I'll do right away is put it in, because all it is a color shape. It's not, doesn't necessarily have to be a flower, but just a shape. And if you notice, I have my colors running into my greens, and then the green running into the color, and then the color running into the greens, and that's so I get a smooth transition. And what it does is it ends up where I'm painting a mass. I see a little bit of shadow in the whites, and so I'll put that in now and let that just run right into, little ups there, let it run into the greens. So I've already established a little bit of form in the white flowers. By mixing the color on my palette, on my paper, I give myself the opportunity to constantly change. I am not, if I don't like that color green, I can just put another color on top and keep running it down and changing as I go, if I wish. Now I have white masked some of the little grasses that are coming out on the side because they're variegated. And the white mask is, it's called Incredible White Mask, and it's a latex. And what it does is it protects the paper and leaves me white shapes to work with afterwards. I have avoided coming in with this Shasta daisy, but what I'm going to do is go right into the rose. And this rose is a very brilliant pink. And it starts off with a little bit of a shadow shape, and I'm going to paint that shadow shape in to start out with. And I'm forming this, not worrying about painting each petal individually, but overlapping these shapes also. What I'm going to try to obtain is just the outside shape of the flower. Don't worry about the purple running into it, because in nature you'll see all sorts of colors. One pink flower is not that solid same pink throughout. It has all sorts of color in it. And that's how I treat the flowers when I paint. Might even want to punch it up a little more. Now the reason I'm trying to have these hard and soft edges is that I will end up having the eye, it'll help carry the eye through the painting. Now, for some of you that might not have seen me paint before, the back of this flat brush is more or less at many times used as a maul stick. And this helps give me balance. And also gives me an opportunity to get back a little bit. Now I'm running the petals right one after the other. And I realize that they're multi-petaled, and I'm not worrying about that. I'm concerned mainly with the outside shape. But what I am concerned with is not make it look too even, nor do I want this color even. Very often, if your color changes as you go around, it'll help turn the petal, the flower, not the petal. Now at this stage, you can see where there is a divided area here where it's pinker and then it's a little peachier here. And that will be blended together when I go back with my second or third layer of color. What I try to do is to just capture all the basic shapes and then afterwards finish the painting. I don't get involved with the detail initially. This enables me to finish a painting maybe 6-7 months afterwards. Now I'm paying particular attention to this zinnia, and I think I want to have it out a little further. This has a little bit of spark to it. And the zinnia is made up of a lot of small petals. And the main thing to do with this is definitely to mass. I'm leaving room for the center. And the centers of a lot of these flowers really can help add texture to my painting. Now I am coming in with pretty mid-tone color or a little stronger. And I do want to do this so that I don't keep doing washes and washes. I end up with a little more brilliant color. I'll soften this so that when I put that center in, it's not all hard-edged. Now, this to me is a very interesting negative shape. It isn't round like a circle. And that's another thing I concentrate on when I do my bouquets. I try not to have everything even everywhere. And my negative space, which is the outside of the bouquet, is what I want to have interesting. This is dry, so I'm just coming right up to it and adding some foliage. Because it's a pale color, I can punch it up a little more. And so then I'm going to soften this edge here, and then afterwards I'm going to come in and complete the negative space inside. And so I'm just going to let that pink run down. It's very dark and rich in there, so I'll come in with some negative painting afterwards. These little wax flowers are put in the bouquet to add as accents, but they are in groupings, and I want to paint them in groupings rather than small individual little flowers. Very often students paint everything individually and they have all these dots all over the page. It's a lot easier to pull them together and have them actually say something by doing it all at one time. Now my green is running into the flowers and it doesn't bother me at this point. If it gets to be a little too bad, I just can punch up the color a little. You can see now where my white mask is showing up in the painting. And the grasses are being masked. I'm going to come in here now and start adding some very rich greens. So I end up, what I'm trying to do is establish some of my darks my very darks and some of my very greens, rich greens, just to give me an idea of how deep I'm going to go in color. That stem is a little too rich, so I'm just going to go back with a little cadmium lemon and let the color run down. Add a little water just to lighten this. Coming with a, moving right into that rose. Because this rose has a real rich yellow bottom, I want to pick up the excess greens and hit that yellow right on. As you will see in almost all the flowers I do, that the first thing that goes in is the outside shape. I don't worry about anything else in the flower. Already you can tell that that's a rose without any detail. We're going in with the other one, rose, and that's a very soft, subtle color. I use a lot of the Jaune Brilliant. I'm going to use a little bit of my raw sienna too. Little, and just dab in all three. A little bit of Windsor red comes across very nicely in this. Now I'm going to go back to the top and work on some of the greens that I left in, just developing the negative space a little more. As I'm developing the green area in the upper left-hand corner, I'm coming back with very rich color because I'm working next to the white flowers, and the darks help push the flowers out. Even though in the bouquet you might not see it as dark as this, and I'm doing overlapping masses in front of the grasses just to start creating depth. And my calligraphy comes in handy again. So I see some fern shapes in the background. And I need to tone the color down a little so it does still go in the background. But also to lend variety to the area. I do not like where that ended compared to this. It's a little too much of a sameness, so I'm just going to add on. When I come back with the second brush, with the second wash, I use my flat brush, which is loaded with water, to soften my edges. And this helps create hard and soft edges. It almost makes it more or less of a wet and wet watercolor, only you're painting one dry. Now I am going to start coming in and I'm putting in the shadow patterning here. I'm using an analogous color to start out with because I don't want it a dead color and I want it to glow a little. Now remember, I'm not really painting a rose, I'm just painting shapes. When people watch me paint, they see that I'm looking at the bouquet more than I am my painting. And that is true because I'm always looking for new and different shapes, something exciting, something that is a little unusual. And so I do take the time to sit back and look at the subject matter. And every time I paint a rose or a leaf or something, it's not the same because what I see is different. Nature changes all the time. Now I'm going to come in with this other rose and just pick out some areas that I think are of importance. See how that flat brush gives the color a nice soft transition. And by using the soft brush, it helps to create form. But the most important thing is the paint from the first wash has to be dry before you go back. Otherwise, it'll swish together. I'm going to come in now and work with this zinnia. And I did just what I told you not to do. So I need to pick it up. That dark green that I put in that area is running into the zinnia. Ordinarily, I might not mind it, but I do at this stage. Now I squint and I pick out the major negative spaces, shapes. I don't look for every petal, but only what really will make it a little more interesting. Start out with the fern. And I'm overlapping it with some of the foliage that I painted in earlier. This helps create depth. It's a different value. And you'll notice that there's a color change as I proceed. And I'm coming right into the daisy. And what I will do, I haven't drawn it in, but what I'm going to do is paint around the major petals that I see. I'll just do this free. I want to bring some of the colors of the wax flower up there. Using that water brush all the time. Now the wax flowers are beautiful small buds, but I'm treating them as a mass. And in my bouquets, I always try to have large and small shapes because that's what I'm very intrigued with painting, the relationship between them all. This is getting a little too picky, so I'm just going to smooth it out a little. A little too dark at this stage. But you can see where I'm coming in now and pulling out that blossom of Lisianthus. And also creating a little bit of depth in the greenery. And by coming in here, I'm not painting individual leaves, I'm painting shapes. variegated leaves are not really white against green, but I'm going to treat them that way. They're more of a subdued yellow. But I'd like to have the white because white in my bouquets or on the paint and watercolor just sparkle. So I'm hitting this with very strong color. And what I'm doing is pulling it out and where it's soft. So already you have the feeling that the petal or that the leaf is turning. Making sure that I keep those outside edges white. Before this gets a little too strong, I'll come back in and soften it with the water. Now, I mix my greens basically because I want them to be gray greens. I don't want them to be bright greens out of the tube, and I don't want them to dominate the painting. They can complement my colors, but I don't want the painting to be of just greens. I treat them more as background. Now, the dahlia has many, many petals. And not only that, if you squint, you can see a whole variety of color. And so, I'm going to start. The thing is to paint this so it doesn't look like a spider. And I treat this the same way. I work with the outside edges. Well, we have a little drip there. Just lift it, wash it with water. I want to make sure they're not the same size when I finish, or if they are, that their appearance is different. Now I want this overlapping the dahlia underneath. But at this stage, I'm not worrying that there's 42 or 52 petals. All I'm looking for is the feeling of the plant. And before it dries, I start in with my greens and connect. leaving some white spaces, but definitely not everywhere. And the white spaces are shapes all the time. They're not just dots. And I want to soften this because I'm going to have to come in afterwards. And in fact, I think I'll start it right now. But I'm going to come right in with this dahlia and let the colors run. Now, as I'm looking at this, it has a cast shadow in that part of it where the two flowers abut each other. And then as it moves away, it gets lighter. A little richer in the center. And I paint what I see. I have white masked the foliage from the woods, and that's those little white fluffs. And that's what creating these dots. But if you notice that in the way the dots have been laid in, that they're in groupings, they're not just all individual. They're all different sizes, they're all different shapes. And right away I'm going to come in and put some of the massing that I see in the background. A lot of different color greens, a little bit of blues. But I'm paying particular attention to the negative space. And at this stage, with the negative space, I'm not referring to the outside shape, but the inside shape that I do not paint. Very rich green in here. Now I'm bringing this petal, this leaf, right up to the edge of the variegated one. And I'm leaving it hard-edged because I want the variegated one to push forward. And here with some little darks, start to push this out. Now I'm softening this because I want to come in and put that purple lisianthus in. So I'll let that dry and start over here going down into the white lily. I'm going to start with this wax flower, the massing, and then work down into the large groupings of the foliage, and then over until right into the lily. Now I want to cause a creation of soft shadows and just the feeling that there's a lot going on in this area. Not so happy with that, so I'm just going to wash it out and let that gray shadow remain. Using the cerulean blue, I'm going to come in and form the very back petal of the lily. That did not come out as soft as I planned, but we'll just work with it. To join the foliage with the back part of the lily, I went from the soft, soft green into a very soft, pale cerulean cobalt blue, which helps form the back petal of the lily. Now I am really squinting and looking at all the negative space as to what I have going on in here. But by painting these rich darks next to the white, I'm starting to pop it out. A little bit of reflected light in the petal. And so I start with my cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and then I drop in a little bit of that quinacridone yellow. And that gives me my reflected light. At this stage, I'm not too concerned about the stamens. This came out a little too greeny, so I'm going to play around and see how I can improve upon that off-white shade. There, that does it. Nice shape there with that hosta leaf. Coming out on the other side of the lily is this vibrant magenta shape. And that was placed there to help pop the white flower. My brush is normally loaded with more pigment, and I probably will mix more on the palette than I ever do on the page this time. Now you need to soften your edges as you go because you don't want it to be cut out like a paper doll, or you don't want it to be monotonous. There's a lot of blue in the center there, so I'm just going to let it drop. And see where I had let the colors run between the magenta and the gold? It just softens it. It's very softened. I can go back over top. Or I don't have to even. I can let it just... Now, if you notice when I'm coming back in that I don't do individual little shapes, I do connecting shapes. It's just like doing a puzzle. It takes a little bit of patience to design in the negative, but the results are worth it. I see a lot going on in the greens underneath the Shasta daisy. So I'm just putting in a mass of different colors. A little light, maybe mid-tone or a little lighter. And after that dries, then I'm going to go in and do my positive painting on top. And now I'm going to come in right at the top of this huge dahlia. Wet green was not quite dry, so we just lift it. And actually, I'm painting around the light petals. Pulling the color out. Now I'll come back into that one more time. I'm going to have to get into the the purple part of the Lisianthus next. and develop the, go back to the white lily to pull that out. Now this is multi-petaled, as almost everything in this bouquet is. And I approach it the same way. But I see, in my purples, I see pinks, so I add it as I see it. Or I might even see a blue. And I'm bringing the color right behind the dahlia. Filling in that slot. These have great, very graceful petals. And so I'm exaggerating the shape that I see. I'm not worried about, I'm not going to include the variegated sections in the Lysianthus. Now, I'm going to come in here, I see some very strong darks. And this is important to capture just the shapes. Not worried about every petal. But more or less a feeling. The white daisy, I came in the front and put a very slight blue tint to it just to start to give it form. And this area here, I'd like to make it a little darker because not so much that it's what I see, but rather it's because I want to bring out this variegated leaf. Now I want to give the impression that there is a mass of foliage going throughout here. So when I put my stems in, I just don't do one at a time, but I do groupings. And if I see any little bend or wiggle, I exaggerate it. And this helps to give the painting rhythm. Okay, the zinnia has a very distinct center. And so I'm exaggerating it a little more. I've put some yellow in, and now I'm developing the belly of the flower. I'm not going to worry about pulling this area out too much, but just with a few little strokes. And this starts to give this form. The shadow patterning on the leaf, on the stem is quite interesting. And also, now I'm going to come in and develop some of these greens behind the flower. While I'm here, this area kind of has a hole in it, and the two of these look like twins. what I often do when I have an area that isn't developed, or after I paint that I see there's a hole in it, but yet the bouquet doesn't relate to it, what I do is I get subject matter and I hold it up and I see if it will fit. And then if I think it'll work, I'll just start to paint it in. And so this is more or less a very interesting fern. And what I'll do is just change my colors and move up into the bouquet. This is me going against what I said, where you start at the top and paint down. But what I am doing, as you can see, is combining the two shapes with this fern. I'm next going to go bring out the white lily. And I have white mask where the white wax flowers are, so now I'm just going to glaze over in the deep foliage. By using this white mask, I don't have to paint around. I can just paint over it. And I see all sorts of other colors in there, so I can just put it in. And it's very dark, so I can even come in with a little richer green to start out with. And that'll pop some of those flowers. Now notice I don't concern myself with doing everything. And what I'm trying to do is just to get a feel. Using Windsor green and alizarin crimson, which is my really dark, dark green, maybe a little permanent magenta, I'm going to start pulling out this rich lily form. And I don't want it solid black because it ends up a little too dense and heavy and opaque. Now I'm going to use cobalt blue and come in with the patterning of that I see that the center of the lily creates. Oh, I don't like that color. so I'll just lift it. Now, during the break, I did draw where I'm going to have the stamens, and so that is what I'm going to be painting around. I'll let that section dry after I do a little more. I don't want the green in there, so I'll just lift it. Now I'm putting out a lot of color, a lot of yellows, a lot of blue, and basically my very rich blue. Because when I start this pine, I can't stop. I want it to all flow together so it looks like a mass. And this is where using the stick as the brush as a maul stick comes in handy. Softening edges here and there, letting some of the color run together. Now I know where the stamens are going, so I'm not going to get myself involved with those. I'll paint up to where they will be. The next thing I think I need to do is just put the centers on the lilies. And to me, the centers of the flowers and the centers on the lilies and all the little accents I've done I consider it added entertainment. And that's why I wait to do it at the end, so that I don't overwork. I do them different shapes, even though you might see them all the same shape. I'll make them different overlapping shapes. Using just the heel of this flat brush, I'll pull the color in.
Several days later, I completed the painting. After the white mask was removed, I continued to balance my lights and darks throughout to enhance the feeling of movement. More of the centers were enriched, the foliage and grass groupings were extended, And finally, the stems were added to the bottom.
This is the end of the demonstration, and I hope from this that you have gleaned some of the essence of painting a flower bouquet. Not necessarily thinking about everything or painting everything that you see, but just major portions of it. I hope that you have enjoyed it and have picked up many tips and thoughts about your next painting.